still there? How do families begin to rebuild emotionally? How do children find safety again? And how do those who come to help manage their own stress? This evening, you're going to join me and my guests while we discuss the topic, weathering the mental storm post Melissa. We also want to make sure that you're a part of the discussion. And so here's a question for you. How has Hurricane Melissa affected you emotionally or mentally? Send your answers to us via WhatsApp text and WhatsApp voice notes. And that number is 997-3125. And we're going to ask you to keep your voice notes no longer than 30 seconds. Today, I have to apologize, our studio lines aren't working, but you can watch us and comment live on our Facebook page and on our YouTube channel. We're going to talk about the things that touch our homes, our health, and our hearts. And we're going to be right back with our guests for this evening, Dr. Hyacinth Peart, counseling psychologist, and Reverend Mike Aiken, pastor and counselor in one of the disaster zones that we have been left with by Hurricane Melissa. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
November is Youth Month, and on the next Campus Connection, we will be focusing on science and technology. The impact of science and technology is huge. It is shaping how young people learn, work, and live. Some ways in which it is affecting youth and productivity include access to information, development of essential digital skills like coding, enabling flexible work arrangements, streamlining tasks, and improving collaboration on various platforms. Join us with special guests, Ms. Cavell Hilton, STEM Builders Learning Hub Limited, Dr. Shara Watson, Executive Director of the Scientific Research Council, as they share how youth can upskill and stay ahead. Plus, don't miss our honor roll segment featuring Damari Sewell, Region 6 Vice President of the National Secondary Students Council and a student at St. Jago High School. Campus Connection is proudly brought to you by Live Good Anti-Violence Campaign from the Ministry of National Security and Peace. Tune in on Tuesday, November 18 at 5:30 p.m. on Love 101, the family station.
Welcome back. You are listening to Family Time on Love 101 FM. And I want to do a big welcome to our very special guests. We have with us today Dr. Hyacinth Peart, counseling psychologist, and we also have Reverend Mike Aiken, who is pastor and counselor in one of the disaster zones left by Hurricane Melissa. And I am glad that you have joined me. Welcome to you both.
Oh, thank you. Thank you indeed. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Great. I am only hearing a baritone. Am I going to hear another tone as well with Dr. Hyacinth Peart? Mike, is only you. Sure. I am joking. You know I'm joking. But it's so good to have you, and I hope Dr. Hyacinth will be able to join us soon. But I want to remind our listeners to join us by answering this question. How has Hurricane Melissa affected you emotionally or mentally? You can WhatsApp your voice notes or your text messages, and the number is 997-3125. And please try to keep the voice notes to no longer than 30 seconds. We apologize for not having our studio lines today, but you can watch us and comment live on Love 101 FM Facebook and on our YouTube channel. Now we're going to get going. We are talking about weathering the mental storm after Melissa. And I just want to ask you, Reverend Mike, to just give us a brief overview of what you have seen as you have been on the ground after Hurricane Melissa.
Well, the devastation physically is so evident, my brother. The areas that I've been to are absolutely destroyed. So that's the most evident thing. And of course, especially with areas like Montego Bay, where I know people like you are used to the nice hip strip area and other things like that. Uh, it's been smashed, been destroyed. My concern, of course, in going to council and be alongside persons is the fact that quite often when a hurricane like Melissa passes through, you see the physical evidence, you can relate to that and respond to that, but often people are traumatized and destroyed mentally and emotionally, and that's not so evident unless you get close to them to understand what's happening with them from day to day. So I took the opportunity on behalf of Training Dynamics, the counseling firm with which I work. The CEO is Dr. Ainsley Deer, a well-known and psychologist in Jamaica, and we have been doing yeoman service to the affected areas. Head back down there on Thursday and perhaps Friday, and I go with another group tomorrow to Falmouth. So we're just letting people know, and especially for those who are in areas where once again Love FM is being broadcast. We're not leaving you alone. We're going to come alongside you. We're going to help you lift your burden and deal with the stresses and the trauma of life that have now become normal life for persons in these areas that look as if somebody dropped a bomb on it, Roland. I don't know if you've gone. And for any of your listeners who have gone, we've all been shocked. We see the thing, we see it on video and see it on Instagram, see it on social media, but when you actually get there, it's a whole different kettle of fish, as they say. But I'd encourage everybody to reach out.
Absolutely, Reverend Mike. And you asked me if I went, and we're talking about what we encountered when we went on the ground. And the answer to your question is yes. I have been over to the west, and the route that I took was the north coast, and then I had to head south. After passing through Montego Bay, I think it's Reading, we turned and began to head south, and we had to go up over the ridge of Jamaica to go back down to a little community where my family is from. And Reverend Mike, what you have described is kind of inconceivable unless you see it and witness it for yourself.
Yeah.
I am going to mention the name of a community. It's called Chester Castle. Have you been through there? Have you seen that particular area?
No, I haven't been.
Chester Castle is up in the mountains. But guess what? Up in the mountains can flood too. And we passed a community up in the mountains that apparently a river reverted to its original
course.
Yeah. And when we passed, people's backyards had a raging river running through it. And they were sitting in the front yard just looking at us pass.
Wow.
And there were houses. And I'm talking about more than a week after Hurricane Melissa. This is not a day after. This is more than a week after.
Right.
We passed houses in a community where all you could see were the tops of the windows of the house.
Mm-hmm. You there? Hello.
And I'm going to use the word depressing.
Mm-hmm.
It was incredibly strange, unusual, and depressing.
Yeah.
And that has stuck with me. One of the things, Reverend Mike, and I guess we'll get into it, I wasn't personally, meaning myself physically or my family, I wasn't personally affected by it. But when I went down there and I spent a little time and I came back up, apparently it did something to me. And so a few days later, when I was talking to a very good friend of mine, the emotion came out at that point. And I was
Yes,
talking to a
not
very
unusual.
good friend, and I didn't realize how much it had hit me until he was looking at me and I was looking at him. And he said, I understand because I went down there. And the two of us were, in a way, consoling each other.
Yes, yes. Yeah, that kind of delayed reaction to trauma is not unusual at all.
But I wasn't even the original person to get the trauma.
To
I'm
get,
thinking
yeah.
now, what
Well, that's
about those
because,
who
my
were
brother,
there?
yeah, you evidently have the gift of empathy.
Well, I guess that's a good thing to have, but I don't want so
Yes, it
much.
is. But I saw, I don't know if you've seen the picture that has been going around of a cell tower that has been absolutely twisted and mangled by the hurricane. I remember
Yes,
when I first saw it, I of course immediately thought, but what about the people who have lived through this? Emotionally and mentally, they're twisted and mangled like that cell tower. But again, not so evident at a first glance. We've got to get beside people to understand what their needs are and then respond accordingly. It's not just bread and butter needs, although that is necessary. People need to be eating constantly and consistently now. But especially for those who pray and those who are empathetic like you seem to be, uh, take the time to talk to God about the mental and emotional aspects of people's lives and ask Him to intervene supernaturally while we do the natural work.
absolutely. But we have to go for a break. And so I'm reminding our listeners the question is, how has Hurricane Melissa affected you emotionally or mentally? That's our special question for you. And we're looking forward to your responses. We're going to take a short break now, but when we come back, we're going to talk about how families can start healing together and why the road to recovery begins at home. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Grace is giving shoppers discounts on over 20 of your favorite Grace products when you cash out at participating supermarkets. The time that Grace can move is
5:45.
Every road, every ride, Burt's Auto Parts and KYB have you covered. From October 24, 2025 to January 30, 2026, get 15% off when you purchase 2 or more KYB shocks at any Burt's location. Plus, enjoy 10% off installation at Burt's Service Center. And for a limited time, you also get a gift with every KYB shocks purchase. So whether it's pothole, corners, or smooth highways, ride in comfort and confidence with KYB shocks from Burt's Auto Parts. Conditions apply. It hurts if you don't check Burt's.
Welcome back. You are listening to Family Time on Love 101 FM, and we're talking about weathering the storm, the mental storm post Melissa. And we want you to tell us, how has Hurricane Melissa affected you emotionally or mentally? How has Hurricane Melissa affected you emotionally or mentally? We're going to invite you to send those responses to us, please. You can comment on our YouTube channel or on our Facebook page, and you also know that you can reach us by WhatsApp. Our guest today is Reverend Mike Aking, pastor and counselor in one of the disaster zones left by Hurricane Melissa. And I'm hoping we'll be joined a little later by Dr. Hyacinth Peart as well. But Pastor Mike, for many families, right, rebuilding the home is one thing. We also have to rebuild the heart, the psyche, our emotions, all of that. What are some signs? And this is, I hope, a question that we can get some responses to. What are some signs that someone, a spouse, a parent, or a neighbor, may not be coping well emotionally after a disaster like this? What are some things we can look for?
Well, so some of the signs of trauma that we should look for, particularly if you know the person and know their patterns, are they eating less? Not because they don't have food, but because they simply are not inspired to take care of self like that. You know, um, if somebody goes quiet all of a sudden, it could be, of course, be another indication that they may not be coping well with the trauma that they've experienced. On the other hand, too, some respond to trauma by talking too much. So it does depend on what the person's regular pattern happened to be previously. Of course, there are people who trauma leads them to express themselves emotionally, either through anger or some other similar emotion. They may lash out at you if you try, of course, even to help them. Those are signs, again, that they're not coping well, and perhaps they may need professional help. They may need to see a trauma counselor. Uh, and of course, for those who are part of a wider family, whether that is your immediate family, your church family, this is the time. It's during trauma that people need to learn to help each other, depend on each other, embrace each other. This is not the time for malicious behavior and other harmful behaviors like that, because it's exacerbated in this time. You know the hurt that you feel when somebody speaks inappropriately to you, in terms of either name calling, speaking angrily, being short tempered. You know the trauma of improper relationships with each other. So imagine having to live that kind of life in the middle of recovering from a disaster. It's all exacerbated. So I beg those who are hearing, this is not the time for war and fighting. Let's pull together with each other. Let's embrace each other. Let's lift up those who need to be lifted up. And this is the time we need to depend on each other and collaborate and build back stronger.
Reverend Mike, I hear you with that, and it sounds to me like something that may be harder to do than to say. And the reason why I bring this up now is because some of us may be forced to live in close proximity to people, whereas we were not before. Now we may have to be sharing a single room as opposed to a house.
Right.
And we may have to be taking turns sleeping on a bed because there's only one bed left. How do we navigate that kind of situation as a family? How do we navigate the kinds of obstacles that are in front of us normally in a situation now where things are not normal?
Well, you're absolutely correct, my brother Roland. You know, part of the counsel I've been giving to people in the impacted areas is that this is a time to live more deliberately. Let me explain what that means. We tend to make life happen to us, especially as Jamaicans. We wake up from morning to morning and life just happens. Very few of us wake up and actually deliberately say, I am going to say something positive to Roland today. I'm going to do something nice for Roland today. Very few live like that. But in times of trauma and grief and distress, you have to really live deliberately, because what has happened to many of us over the years is that when we go through stress, that's when you know what kind of person Roland really is. You know, that's when you find out that he has a few flaws, because not many of us have deliberately exercised or learned to exercise things like self-control and kindness. Not many of us have learned to control our tongue, because we just live from day to day. But in this kind of trauma that has hit this island, this is not the time for inappropriate speaking or behavior, because it just worsens the situation that you're in. You know, I grew up with brothers, and there are times that we would just get at each other. You know, that sibling behavior. But in stress, in trauma like this is not the time for that kind of sibling behavior. This is a time to live deliberately as it pertains to kindness, gentleness, self control, and all the characteristics that a life skills manual tells us to exhibit every day. And for those who have learned to do that, then living through grief and trauma, of course, is much more easily managed.
What are some ways that you have seen families actually support and exhibit this behavior? You have been down there, you've been consistently trying to help out. What are some positive things that you've seen come out of how families are interacting with each other, sir?
Well, I tell you something. Of course, food for some is in short supply. And I know there are people who, especially siblings, who never used to share. Boy, sharing is now something that they're doing because it's a survival thing now. Now, there are those, of course, as we've heard over the news, who have been uh, robbing and taking things and so on. But in general, people have learned to get together. I mean, I know one family that they lived in a decent house, but right after the hurricane, you know what their housing situation was? Mom and dad with two children in an abandoned car in their driveway, and they're still there. Now, you have girls, right?
No, I
You know?
only have a boy.
Oh,
Yeah.
only a boy. Well, for those who listen and know of girls, right? And who, of course, I mean, sometimes are in each other's here constantly yapping at each other. Now, you've got to learn to get along now, because you had your own room, your own place to be, and all of a sudden, all four are in a car. You ever slept in a car, Roland? It is not the most comfortable place,
Yes, I
you
have,
know.
sir. Yes, I have. And it was cold as ice.
Yeah, you know, I tell you something. When I went down to Montego Bay on an urgent call to help some persons, and I it was so urgent, I didn't get a chance to find out if there is anywhere I could overnight. So by the time I got there, most hotels were closed. You know, so I sat thinking, my goodness, I have to sleep in my car. What am I going to do? How am I going to use the bathroom? These are not things to think about normally. When you're at your home, you go to the bathroom. I had to try to adjust how my day, the next day, is going to start. And in that moment, it made me realize, Michael, this is happening for somebody every day right now in St. Elizabeth or in St. James or somewhere else. We don't have the comfort to wake up anymore with an ordered life. We have to reorder life now and live it as best as we can. Now, fortunately, in my case, a travel operator uh, heard that I had rushed down there to give emotional aid to persons and counseling. And she actually called the hotelier and asked him to open his closed hotel and give me room. I'm eternally indebted to the lady. I mean, I know you have broadcast rules. That's why I haven't called her name or her company, but it was really, really a blessing. And in that moment, again, I realized some people don't have that blessing down in the South. They
Right.
have to just soldier on through,
They have
and
to
get
just
through with life. Yeah. So we have to pray for them and support them as best as we can.
Yes, sir. Yes,
And by
sir.
the way,
And
it's not just about food, and things that, remember, I was sharing with someone recently that this is just phase one. Relief work is just phase one. And by the way, the easiest phase to run. We have to provide for people's needs, as in food, water, covering, shelter for them to be able to survive. But think about this, Roland. Many of those homes that were destroyed had a mortgage. Many of those cars that were destroyed had a bank loan. In case you don't know, bank loans and mortgages don't have your kind of empathy. They simply operate mathematically according to dates. So if Roland misses his car payment, misses his mortgage payment, his credit rating is messed up because the mathematical system that we call our banking can't show any sympathy because Roland is suffering. And I don't know if we've begun to think like that yet, and we've begun to put in place the help that will be needed when that phase really manifests itself on us. There are going to be some more hurting people.
We are up on a break, and I want you to continue with that because I am happy to have a comment on that. But we're going to go for a break now, Rev. And I want to remind our listeners that you're listening to Family Time on Love 101 FM. And the question is, how has Hurricane Melissa affected you emotionally or mentally? You can send a WhatsApp voice note or text to 997-3125, and we will be sure to read it. We want to talk a little bit next about what Reverend Mike just shared, the kind of impersonal things that follow a disaster. But then we also want to talk a little bit about the children. They may not always say how they feel, but they are going to show it in different ways. We talk about that when we come back. Don't go anywhere.
I'm Itana, and human trafficking is everybody's business. Call 1-888-PROTECT to report suspected cases of child trafficking.
The time by the Ministry of National Security is
6 o'clock.
All roads lead to New Budget Supplies from now until Christmas.
Yes, sir.
We've got zinc, lumber, tarpaulins, form ply, everything you need to rebuild.
Hallelujah.
Big discounts on UPPVC windows, paints, decorative hardboard, dress ply, and lots more.
Everything.
Open every Sunday until Christmas. New Budget Supplies, 195 Hagley Park Road. Call 9234560 or WhatsApp 581-6165. Remember the name, New Budget Supplies, always the best prices.
Welcome back. It is now about 1 minute past 6. And you're tuned to Love 101 FM. This is Family Time, brought to you by Family Life Ministries. And Family Life Ministries provides counseling for people with all kinds of challenges from all walks of life. Before we continue our discussion on our topic, weathering the mental storm after Melissa, let's get a word from Reverend Mike in this episode of Word to Flesh, Moments with Reverend Mike.
The Life Skills Manual that we call the Bible offers practical wisdom on how to heal our mind, body, and spirit when facing distress. It emphasizes recognizing our pain, recognizing God's presence, God's power, and God's purpose in our distress. David, former king of the country of Israel, seems to have discovered 3 of these truths in such a way that he wrote a song. It says, "Hear my cry, O God, attend unto my prayer. From the ends of the earth will I cry unto thee when my heart is overwhelmed. Lead me to the rock that is higher than I." Then a first-century lawyer named Paul helped us with the last truth when he wrote, "And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God and to them who are called according to his purpose. Have you recently been distressed and battered by the hurricane? Then let's embrace King David and lawyer Paul's approach. Acknowledge your pain, cry out to God, believe in his presence and power, then trust him that good will come out of our distress and disaster. Our only job during our distress is to practically find ways to love God and to live according to the purpose for which he has created us, believing that he can work all things for good and bring beauty from ashes. I'm Reverend Mike from Fellowship Tabernacle, and we just had a WTF moment.
Thank you, Reverend Mike, for that WTF moment, and it is so fitting for us. I want to welcome him back. We are talking with Reverend Mike Aiken, and I see that he has invited us to use his middle name, so we're going to call the whole government name Michael Andrew Aiken. Big up to you, sir. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, sir.
Before we went for the break, you had mentioned this kind of impersonal, totally objective outcome of a disaster, which would be the fact that people have lost assets and have no way of recovering them. And on top of that, they still owe the financial institutions money. And I wanted to make a quick point. I was so glad when I logged on to one of my banking apps, and they had a very big, very pretty message for us. And they said, if you're having any problems, contact them because they are willing to defer payments without any penalty. And I thought to myself, no, this is a bank that sound and look like them care, because other banks not doing that. And I thought to myself, this is definitely a way that they can exercise good corporate leadership and engagement by just helping people who need help.
So true.
But Rev, when we talk about disasters like this, we know that adults feel the weight, but children also carry burdens. And some may carry those burdens and not even
realize
give
it.
you any indication. Yeah, they themselves may not be realizing what they're going through. What would you say? What would you say about trauma in children? What does that look like, sir?
Well, of course, they're not as prepared as we are, adults, speaking of adults, to deal with trauma. Although I do believe, though, because of my belief in a divine, very sensible creator. No, think about it. Imagine a God who created you with tear ducts, which means he created you to do what?
Cry.
To cry. And then we as clinicians have come along and found out that one of the most therapeutic things when dealing with trauma and grief is bawling like a baby. It helps you heal. God looked down the corridor of time right at the beginning of creation and actually put tear ducts in you and me so that we could deal with the issue of grief and distress. Now, I mentioned that because that's an easy one to see and realize, and I suspect that because he's so sensible a creator, he would also have known that some of those persons going through grief will be little ones. So they may be more prepared than we realize. Okay? But at the same time, I would suggest to any parent that this is a time to keep them close. And again, don't do like Jamaican adults usually do. Them see a child crying. Hey boy, shut up your mouth, man, stop the foolishness. Stop crying. No, this is not the time for that. Allow them to, as we say, bawl like a baby. Okay, it's part of the process of dealing with the bad that they feel. Then besides allowing them to cry, comfort them. Now, Roland, I know this kind of therapy is difficult for Jamaicans, because we're not really anymore a hug up culture and a Roland, put your head on my shoulder kind of thing, right? But parents, as best as you can, be the first shoulder of comfort for your children, because I presume that would perhaps be the safest shoulder of comfort.
Wow, what
So
a
be
comment.
mindful. Yeah, be mindful of that,
Yeah.
because there are people who use times of grief and distress to prey on others.
Yeah.
And I don't mean P-R-A-Y, that's the P-R-E-Y, to prey on others. And we must be mindful of that. So take the time to comfort your children and be their first area of protection. As I mentioned earlier, this is a time to lean on others as a family. And in leaning, give your children, of course, the space and the freedom to lean and express self, and take the time to explain to them about what has happened. Let them know that it's not the end of the world, as difficult as it has been. So keep the encouragement going. Keep hope alive, as one famous Reverend would often say, because, the importance of hope in sustaining human life is overlooked even with clinicians like myself and others, but it's important. In fact, if you look at the written word of God, one of the most important themes in the Bible is what? Hope. Hope is a theme that keeps you going from day to day. So I tell you all that to say, give your children hope for a new day, no matter how difficult it gets. Just keep their spirits as high as you can. Even if you have to take time to go cry yourself, no, it's the reality of life. Yeah, go to take a ball outside of their site, and then
You
come
know,
back.
Rev, sorry to cut you, but when you say that, it raises a question in my mind, and I've actually seen this, where some children are very perceptive, and they begin to try to help parents, and they begin to try to be self-sacrificial in order to get things back on an even keel. How healthy is that for a child, and how should a parent respond when a child tries to do that?
Well,
When a child tries to do that?
Well, I tell you something, it may be very helpful, because one suggestion that clinicians make is that for yourself and for children, to help them go through grief and trauma, establish as quickly as you can a sense of safety and a sense of routine. Because you know that once you're doing something, it tends to take your mind off of the distress of the moment. And that really helps the children too. So give them something to do. All right. And if that means helping you according to their little capacity, don't run them. Give them a chance to contribute. If it means getting, there's a time where you might have to go to the way to get water, because water in the pipes. Yeah, give them a bottle to find some water and carry also. So keep them active to keep their minds off of the distress that they're going through. So it's a good thing. It can be a good thing when they reach out to help. But don't burden them too much. Don't give them a load that they can't carry. It will only make life worse for them. And by the way, prioritize self-care. Earlier I said, yes, seek the help of a clinician to help you navigate through this time. But besides that, as best as you can, pay attention to what you eat, pay attention to your physical, because you really react much better to distress when you are in better health. So this is not the time to make things lag. Now, I know some people just don't have enough to eat right now. We do know that. But as soon as you can get back to an even keel, this is not the time to be picky and refuse food because of who giving you and things like that. No, it's the reality of Jamaica. I not eat from Roland. This is not the time for that, because you have to take care of self right now to make sure that your system will rebound as quickly as it can. So pay attention to your own self-care after paying attention to your children's self-care.
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely. We have to go for another break now. I think this may be our final break, and you are listening to Family Time on Love 101 FM. I'm talking with Reverend Michael Andrew Aiken. Was it Andrew or Anthony? Oh, grief. I hope I didn't get that wrong. And of course, Family Life. Family Time is brought to you by Family Life Ministries. And our feedback question today: how has Hurricane Melissa affected you emotionally or mentally? You can comment and we will share your comments. So don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
You can see the face, but not the heart. Those who want to do you wrong.
Bless up. This is Christopher Martin. Human trafficking is a crime. Let's unite to end human trafficking. Be wise, open your eyes. Spot them, stop them, and report them.
A message from the Ministry of National Security.
No shadow at the dark. No shadow at the dark.
Dreams have inspired prophets, warned kings, and guided the faithful. But what do they mean for believers today? This week on The Rock, join guests Marsha MacDonald and Bishop Robert Ellis as they step into the mysterious world of dreams and visions. What's the difference between the two? Are they divine messages from God or simply the mind at work? From Joseph's dream of destiny to modern testimonies of supernatural guidance, we'll explore how to discern what's real, what's imagined, and what's revelation. Plus, don't miss our scripture spotlight. Daniel has a plan. But what is it? So join us this Tuesday on The Rock at 10 a.m. only on the family station Love 101.
Welcome back. You are listening to Family Time on Love 101 FM, and it's so good to have you with us this afternoon. And we are speaking with our special guest, Reverend Michael Andrew Aiken. Bless you, sir. Thank you for being with us.
Yes.
Absolutely. Family Life Ministries provides counseling for people with all kinds of challenges from all walks of life. And I want you to remember, you listeners, that you can tune into the program via our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. And we are talking about weathering the mental storm post Melissa. This is not an easy one for me, Reverend Mike. And I want to raise a question. There are individuals who come to help. There are individuals who, even before the storm is over, they are getting into the mode of, I need to go and help. What kind of emotional wear and tear do they face? And what happens to these first responders, these emergency medical people who see and are involved in trying to solve all of these problems? What happens to them emotionally and mentally?
Well, the advice that we have given to the victims of a disaster and of a distressful situation will apply to caregivers after a time. In fact, our training dynamics, we're getting ourselves prepared right now to run a series of initiatives called Care for the Caregivers, because we recognize that the caregivers are actually going to need attention as soon as the adrenaline in them calms down. Because again, the human body, in my mind, just strengthens my belief in God in every aspect. Again, imagine a creator who put a hormone in you and me called adrenaline, that when we get passionate about something, it helps us engage quickly and we want to get to it. But then we all know that there comes a time when you've done enough or you've done a lot, and you sigh and you start feeling depression and you start feeling some hurts that you weren't aware of. I say all that because caregivers have to take time with self-care, especially after serving. And here at Training Dynamics, we are getting ready to help even now because, by the way, remember there are some caregivers that the hurricane affected who didn't stop giving care because they work at hospitals and clinics, and some that I have had the privilege to counsel. I remember one lady said to me, Rev, I leave my house in the mornings to come to work with no roof. I'm a single nurse. When I leave the house, nobody is there helping to patch up my roof. And I go to work at a hospital that has no roof, but they have workmen working on the roof. Then I leave work 8 hours later to go back to my home with the falling darkness, with no roof, and rain fell while I was at work. So once again, all my things are wet. And she said that frustration has made me so depressed that I had to catch myself when I made a mistake that could have cost a patient's life. And I said, I have to reach out to somebody. I have to reach out to someone. And she did. And of course, hopefully our ongoing counseling will help her to bear the brunt of what she's doing as she gives care. So for the caregivers who run in right now to help, oh, we invite them in, man. Go help somebody, whatever you can bring. But make sure, of course, as I advised one group, that we're going down to Falmouth tomorrow, when there's a chance to identify direct needs of the victims, do that. Don't just take generic stuff, because that can make the whole issue sometimes worse, but try to reach out before you get there and find out what is it, Roland, that you really want. What do you need to survive right now, and get specific items and take them, and as you do so, we'll be more effective. And of course, as we go along, working our way through this disaster, we'll become a little bit more effective in helping each other, both as caregivers and as victims.
Absolutely, Rev. Absolutely. Want to ask this question here now, and I know it may sound a little redundant, but what is the value of things like support groups, things like areas where you're free to speak with other people? What's the
Absolutely.
value of that?
Yeah, man. Absolutely valuable. And it can be underemphasized. That's part of what clinicians call cognitive behavioral therapy, where you get to either speak one-on-one or in groups, being able to emote. And by the way, that's another part of God's design, the expression of self and even anger. I know some people who, when they lose loved ones, they get angry and they're afraid to express their anger, as if somehow God are afraid of them. God is not afraid of your anger. I mean, so if that emotion rises up in you, of course, go ahead and express it, because it's part and parcel of how you deal with the whole issue of trauma. Just don't get so angry until you get vindictive or hurtful of self or others. But I don't tell people to not to get angry or not to cry. Be mindful of that, because it's part and parcel of God's design on how we should deal with grief and distress. So to get back to your direct question, ask it again. what is it that our groups,
I was asking about the
yes.
value.
Yeah, man, the value of groups, especially groups that where you're safe and able to express emotions, express self without fear of being judged. So, by the way, for all the church people listening, this is probably a good chance for you to restart some of your discipleship groups and your groups that deal with giving individuals a chance to process, and again, I'm unashamed about my faith, totally unashamed. So, and I say that to say this, when counseling, I bring my father in from the get-go because he really is the one in the final analysis that somehow sovereignly oversees the process of all of the journey of all of us to get back to good health and to recover. So I don't leave God out of the picture at all. And I would encourage people to find the faith during this time. If your faith was weak before, this is not the time to continue to have weak faith, my brother. This is a time to understand, as I explained to someone recently, that the way we use believe, that word believe, is totally different from it's used in the Bible. For example, I might say, I believe I'm going to go to Portland this evening. And that's totally acceptable. It means what? I may or may not go. But in the Bible, when God used the word believe, it means to be fully persuaded. Nothing can change your mind. It's like how you're fully persuaded that you're a man. Okay. A shotgun won't change that, will it? All right. Now, persons need to right now embrace faith with that kind of belief. This is not the time for wishy-washy faith. This is the time to believe really in God with your whole heart and understand that despite the disaster, a sovereign God is still overseeing the affairs of men. And cry out to him. Even as we heard before, somebody learned that. I think it's in Psalm 61, where David, because of some trauma, wrote a song that says, "Hear my cry, O God, attend unto my prayer. From the ends of the earth I'll cry out to thee." That's a man who knows how to emote in either to his God or in a group setting if he's pulled into a group. But yes, to answer your question, group therapy would be helpful right now.
Rev, one of the things I'm glad you just brought up is David. Because in my mind, there is hardly anybody else in the Bible who is a man. David is a man. And David is so like us. And he reaches out and he cries. And he says what is in his mind.
Yes.
Him don't afraid or ashamed to do it. So we need to remember that we can do that too.
Yes.
And God hears.
It's people like you and I who have kind of misled persons to believe that if them get upset and express themselves in a certain way, God going to fix. And I assure you, there's nothing you or I can do or any listener to threaten God. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to be irreverent and stupid. That doesn't mean you're going to be like Lot's wife and curse God and die. No. But don't be afraid to really express your emotions to the God who created you.
Absolutely. Rev, we're going to have to wrap up because we are almost at the end here. But are there any resources or any kinds of support facilities that you'd want to share with any of the listeners?
Well, yes. In fact, there are a number, of course, although the issue right now, though, Roland, that I found is that in some of the impacted areas, there's no internet, no cellular service, just no
way
Wi-Fi.
to communicate
Yes,
like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So some of those services, of course, won't be applicable. But for those who can, of course, there are private sector companies like Training Dynamics and consultants who offer service. The government, through its Ministry of Health, has a number of web pages that you can turn to for support. Your own family life ministries. Of course, I know during this time, they're perhaps doing human service to offer support to those who are hurting. So call the numbers as they're displayed and seek out help from someone to encourage you, or some persons to encourage you and keep you going at this time if you're in one of the impacted areas and hearing Love FM right now. And if you have been barely brushed by that girl named Melissa, because like Roland and myself, you have known the sense of staying away from volatile young girls, then make sure you can reach out and help somebody. If you haven't been hit hard by her and you have the resources to help, run in and help.
Thank you, Reverend Mike. It is so good that you joined us. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you to listeners. Thanks for being here with us. If you have questions of a personal nature, you're concerned about a friend or family member, call us. You can contact our head office at 920-1034, 926-8101, or 5798-690. And of course, you can also reach out to us on our new Facebook page at FLM-Family Life Ministries, or subscribe to our YouTube channel, Family Life Ministries-FLMJA, and you can also check us on Instagram, and that is FLMJA. Before we leave you, here is our verse for the evening. Psalm 61 verse 2, it says, "When my heart is overwhelmed, lead me to the rock that is higher than I." Storms may pass, but there is one who never passes and who is always here to help. And that is our God, our Lord and Savior. So reach out to him. Thanks to our special guest tonight, Reverend Michael Aking. Thanks to our show producer, Kathy Gale. Thanks to Derval Graham for piloting us through this hour. And of course, you. Have a great week. I'm Roland Gale, and it was good to be here with you.
You're tuned to Family Radio, broadcasting from King